The Battle of the Pearl River Forts, or the Battle of the Barrier Forts, in late 1856, was an amphibious assault and short occupation conducted by the United States Navy against a series of forts along Qing Dynasty China's Pearl River. It was fought at the beginning of the Second Opium War and was considered an important defeat by the British, whose interest lay in capturing the nearby city of Canton. Background: sailing off the Chinese coast, US Portsmouth and US Levant had received news of the beginning of the Second Opium War. The two sloops of war were tasked with protecting American lives by landing a 150-man detachment of Marines and sailors in Canton. After a peaceful landing, the Americans occupied the ancient city, commanded by both Commodore James Armstrong and Captain Henry H. Bell. San Jacinto arrived in Canton's harbor and learned of the occupation. San Jacinto then landed a shore party of her own. On November 15, 1856, after a brief stay and no military contact, the force withdrew from the city. During the withdrawal, Commander Andrew H. Foote of the Portsmouth rowed out to his ship. As he rowed past the Pearl River forts, the Chinese garrison fired on the small American boat a few times, but the withdrawal continued. The next day, the U.S. seamen had constructed a plan to attack Canton's citadels in retaliation for the Chinese attack on Commander Foote. Battle. Now a force of one steam frigate and two sloops of war, the naval squadron under James Armstrong made their way up the Pearl River and launched an attack on Canton's coastal forts. US Portsmouth closed in on the nearest of the four citadels and fired the initial salvo on November 16. For 2 hours her bombardment continued until the Chinese batteries were silenced. After this first engagement, Chinese and American officials decided to try to settle the matter diplomatically. This failed, and on November 20, Commodore Armstrong ordered his ships to fire again on 2 more of the Chinese forts. This bombardment lasted until the Chinese batteries weakened slightly, and after Levant, commanded by William N. Smith, received a total of 22 cannonball shots in her sails, rigging and hull. Then the landing force was activated, led by Andrew Foote. The force of 287 men quickly captured the first enemy fort, then used its 53 guns to attack and capture the second fort. Once taking the second position, the Chinese launched several counterattacks with some 3,000 Qing Army soldiers from Canton. In a few more days of intense combat until November 24, the U.S. force, with help from the blockade, pushed back the attacking Chinese army, killing and wounding dozens of the attackers, capturing 2 more of Pearl River's forts and spiking 176 enemy guns in the process. Chinese casualties were an estimated 500 killed or wounded. Hundreds of Qing troops became victims in the long bombardments and assaults. The Americans' land forces sustained 10 killed and 32 wounded. US Levant suffered 1 dead and 6 wounded in her exchange with the Pearl River forts. Aftermath. After James Armstrong's attack on the Chinese fortifications, diplomatic efforts began again, and the American and Chinese governments signed an agreement for U.S. neutrality in the Second Opium War. This ended the United States' participation in the conflict, until 1859, when Commodore Josiah Tattenall in the chartered steamship Toei 1 participated in a battle at the Taku Forts which was ultimately unsuccessful. In 1857, the British and French would use Pearl River to attack Canton from water, resulting in the Battle of Canton. America's opening of Asia continued into the 1860s with conflict, such as the Battle of Shimonoseki Straits and a following bombardment, as well as an expedition to Korea in the 1870s.